Tonight, we drift into the ancient Maya lowlands, where frogs croak like weathermen and farmers stare at the stars to guess if their corn will get a drink. The croak before the storm. You wake up in a room made of packed earth and woven reeds. The roof is thatched, the air warm and thick, and the sun outside is already baking the jungle into a soft, steaming sponge. Birds chirp like tiny gossips. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks, long, low, theatrical. You blink up at the ceiling, which is swaying slightly in the breeze like it's breathing. You, dear listener, are now a Maya farmer. You probably won't make it through this day. But don't worry, that's the whole idea. Before you rise, take a second to notice the scent of smoke and maize. Your wife has been up since dark, grinding corn into dough for tamales. There's a faint aroma of burned pepper, maybe because your youngest son tried to sneak some onto the fire again. The hammock beneath you creaks gently, as if encouraging you to stay horizontal. You deserve it. The rainy season is almost here, and your knees know it before the clouds do. Outside, your family compound is quiet, except for the frogs. And that's important because frogs here are meteorological prophets. Yes, frogs, particularly the Ranapipiens or leopard frog, which in these parts is believed to predict rain. Their sudden chorus at twilight or dawn is treated with a kind of reverence. You don't have a weather app, but you have about 50 small, slime-coated weather consultants squatting near your bean field. Across the compound, your eldest son, who thinks he's going to be a priest someday, is kneeling in front of a fire, trying to read ash trails like sacred glyphs. You suppress a smile. You were that boy once. Now, you know frogs are easier to understand than gods. The sky is clear, but the frogs won't shut up. You chew a piece of toasted cacao and consider your odds. Is today the day you plant? Maybe, maybe not. Historians still debate whether frogs really predicted weather or if it was just a good excuse to take a nap under the trees. You put on your woven tunic, grab your stone hoe, and walk toward the field. On the way, you pass the old astronomy platform. It's just a flat stone on a hill, really. But at solstices, priests stand there and pretend to divine the future from the stars, while you pretend to listen. Secretly, you look for frogs. You tilt your head to the sky. Nothing unusual. Then you glance down. 1, 2, 3 frogs, all facing east. And in Maya farming tradition, that's a sign. You call your brother-in-law, who has never been on time for anything, and announce that today's the day. You're going to start planting maize. He groans dramatically and points at the sky. But the stars, he begins. You cut him off with a raised eyebrow. But the frogs, you reply. Out in the field, you begin to dig shallow rows with your wooden digging stick. This is dull work, repetitive and meditative. Every so often, you hear the distant thrum of drums from the temple plaza. Some ceremony or another is happening. You've lost track. A parrot lands nearby and stares at you with judgmental eyes. It repeats something you definitely didn't teach it, probably learned from your kids. You ignore it. You plant seed after seed. Maize, beans, squash, the holy trinity of your civilization. Together, they make up most of your diet, your rituals, and your storytelling. The maize gods are watching, or so they say. You feel the sun overhead soften just slightly. A breeze begins to stir, and then a single drop, then two, then a sudden pattering, like hundreds of tiny drummers on the canopy leaves. The frogs were right. You sit down on a rock and smile. Your brother-in-law walks by with his arms raised to the sky. See? The stars said nothing. He mutters. You just nod, grateful. Tomorrow you'll plant more. Tonight, you'll roast cacao and watch the stars. Not for omens, but for company. That's how it is here, half sky, half mud. The frogs whisper. The corn listens. And you, somewhere between, wait. The observatory without walls. That night, the stars come out thick and buttery, like someone spilled a bucket of glitter across black velvet. You're lying on your back near the old stone platform, watching them flicker lazily while your children argue about constellations. You call it the lizard. Your daughter insists it's the turtle. Your son, ever the priest in training, names it Ekchua, the merchant god. You let him have it. It's late. Pot of atoll, hot corn drink. Rests beside you. Steam curls up like a ghost, sweetened with honey and cinnamon. The fire is low, the air damp with recent rain, and there's a kind of sleepy magic drifting over everything. Your wife walks past with an armful of cassava, muttering something about lazy astronomers. You ignore her, too engrossed in the sky. In the Maya world, stargazing isn't a luxury, it's a full-time occupation. The stars govern planting, harvesting, even marriage. Priests with feathered headdresses and slightly terrifying I paint sit up for hours recording the movements of Venus in bark paper codices. But you just like the quiet. You trace the stars with your finger. One looks suspiciously like a chili pepper. Another, a gourd. There's even one that, if you squint, looks like a frog in mid-leap. It's not official, but it's yours. Funny thing, archaeologists have discovered star charts from Maya cities with objects like Three Turtle Place or Pecked Shield. And yes, occasionally, vegetables. One minor constellation near Köppen may have been associated with squash. Though to be fair, it might also be a war club. Scholars still debate the interpretation. A nearby priest approaches. His jaguar pelt cloak is dragging through the mud, and he doesn't look thrilled. You're lying on the sacred platform, he says flatly. You sit up slowly, wiping at your tunic. I was communing with the sky, you say. And the frogs. He sighs. Not again with the frogs. He offers you a fragment of bark paper. On it, a detailed grid of Venus movements. Every appearance, disappearance, alignment, and wobble tracked meticulously over years. You admire it, the dedication if not the practicality. Venus is important here. The morning star, the evening star. Sometimes a god, sometimes a warning. One war, in fact, was started when Venus appeared during an eclipse. The enemy city took it as a bad omen. Turned out it was just bad timing. The priest lights a small bowl of copal incense. It smells like pine and old leather. He waves it over the chart. Venus reappears tomorrow, he says. After 8 days of invisibility, that means a shift. You nod solemnly. In the weather? He shakes his head. In the market prices for cacao. Of course, even stars can be monetized. Your children are asleep now, curled up on mats nearby. The frogs have resumed their chorus, like an orchestra tuning in the dark. The rain is done, but the world feels wet and waiting. You stretch, bones cracking, and gaze upward. The stars blink. One seems to twinkle more than the others. Maybe it's not a star. Maybe it's a god. Or maybe, just maybe, it's a floating squash constellation watching over your field. Either way, tomorrow you'll check your traps, tend your beans, and try to keep the parrot from mocking the priest again. Life is predictable as long as you listen to the frogs, the stars, and sometimes the chili-shaped constellation that only you believe in. The night deepens, the fire dims, the sky breathes, and you drift somewhere between the lizard and the turtle. Calendar stones and cornbread logic. Morning sneaks in on padded feet. There's no rooster crowing. Your village never really trusted them. But you know it's dawn because the fog is starting to peel back from the jungle trees like wet cotton being wrung out. A low haze settles across your milpa fields, and the frogs have gone mysteriously quiet, suspiciously quiet, the kind of quiet frogs use when they're trying to prove a point. You wake slowly, stretching limbs still heavy from yesterday's planting. Your back complains, but softly, like an old friend reminding you it's still there. You look around your home. Clay walls, a hearth made from smooth stones, a shelf of gourds and half-dried herbs. It's nothing special, but it holds your whole world, including one slightly cursed obsidian mirror your grandmother insisted was good for crops. It mostly reflects dust now. Outside, your neighbor is already pacing in front of a squat circular structure made of carved limestone. It's the village's timekeeper, a calendar shrine. Not a calendar like your cousin's tattoo of a dolphin with Roman numerals on its tail. This one actually works. You walk over, chewing a bit of dry cornbread, and nod at the stone. What's the day? You ask. Your neighbor squints. 5 can 17 Kayab, he says, scratching behind his ear. Or maybe it's 6 can. The priest sneezed during the count. You nod thoughtfully. Sneezing is usually an omen of indigestion, he mutters. I saw him eat 7 tamales. In your village, the calendar is life. And not just one calendar. The Maya track time with at least 3 overlapping systems. The Hab, a 365-day solar calendar. The Tsokin, a 260-day ritual calendar. And the long count, which tracks the endless turning of cycles so vast they make your brain feel like a boiled yam. It's all carved into stones, recorded in codices, and burned into memory. Some days are lucky, some aren't. Today is one of those depends on your attitude kind of days. Perfect for checking the frog ponds. You walk to a shallow pool not far from the cacao grove. There, the frogs are still. No croaking, no hopping, just judgmental amphibian silence. You try a few polite noises to get them going. A cough, a whistle, a full croak imitation that makes a squirrel fall from a tree in surprise. Nothing. You sigh. This doesn't bode well. Back at the house, your wife is slicing squash with a stone blade so sharp it hums. The frogs didn't sing, you say. She raises an eyebrow. So maybe don't hang the laundry. It could rain. She points at the sky, clear and cloudless. Aha! Just like your dreams of being a scribe. You smile. Fair enough. The frog pause gives you time to visit the temple plaza. It's not a grand stone pyramid like in Tikal or Palenque, but it's got decent stairs and a statue that looks like someone halfway between a corn god and a jaguar with a sinus issue. Today, the priests are repainting murals with natural dyes. Reds from crushed cochineal bugs, blues from indigo, blacks from soot and squid ink. The images are vibrant, layered, and honestly a little terrifying. You spot one new figure, a frog perched on a throne, wearing a jade crown. It's subtle, but you suspect someone's been listening to you. You chat with a junior priest who's grinding ink in a shell bowl. He's very proud of his newly learned glyph for storm. It looks like a snake with eyebrows. He tells you, the stars don't lie. Venus is due west of Ixchel. You squint. Does that mean anything? He shrugs. We think it might relate to dreams about frogs. Or toothaches. Maya cosmology is complicated. On your way home, you pass by a small group of elders sitting under a ceiba tree, debating which day is best for planting yams. One of them says only on snake days. Another insists never on snake days. The third offers that any day is fine, as long as your neighbor isn't watching. A fourth elder, half asleep, mutters something about frogs. You give him a respectful nod. Scholars still debate whether Maya farmers truly consulted frogs for rainfall predictions or whether the correlation was more anecdotal. But what's clear is that frogs occupied a special niche not just in ecology, but in cosmic storytelling. You'd rather trust a frog than a priest with a stomach full of tamales, if you're being honest. As the sun sets, you sip spicy chocolate and settle near the fire. Your son draws constellations in the dirt with a stick. That one, he says, is the holy frog. He rides the celestial canoe. Where's he going? You ask. To warn the stars that the rain is coming. You lean back. Good frog. Outside, the first croak returns. Then another, and another. The sky is still clear, but the frogs know. And you? You smile and fall asleep to the gentle rhythm of prophecies in chorus. How to predict rain with amphibians and existential doubt. By the fourth day of this slow, sticky week, your back has resigned itself to its fate. The rains haven't returned in force, but they've started to tease. Little bursts of drizzle that evaporate before they even hit the dirt. The frogs have been on and off about it like a psychic having second thoughts. You start your morning sitting beneath a tree, sipping a lukewarm bowl of chaya soup, wondering if anyone in history has ever figured out frogs. Certainly not your neighbor, who's currently building a mini frog shrine out of empty snail shells and broken pottery. It's for the rain god, he tells you. I think the frog's like a good shrine. You eye the construction. It looks more like a weird birthday cake for lizards. Still, you nod approvingly. Maybe add a beetle or two. For decoration, you head to the village well, where your brother-in-law is trying to lower a jug without dropping it in again. He greets you with a look of tragic determination and a soggy sandal. "The frogs sang last night," he says. "That means rain." You look at the cloudless sky. I made a prediction chart," he continues, proudly pulling out a folded piece of bark. It contains frog noises, time of day, moon phase, and what he calls emotional tone. "Disappointed croak?" you ask, pointing to one entry. He shrugs. "They sound judgmental sometimes." You can't argue with that. It turns out, archaeological evidence suggests some Maya communities tracked frog calls seasonally. Whether as folk wisdom or actual proto-science, no one can say for sure. But patterns were noticed, compared, remembered. In the long quiet nights before thunder, frogs sang, and people listened. You meet a visiting merchant from a neighboring city. He's trading obsidian for dried fish, but you corner him to ask if his frogs are behaving. He nods. "They croaked at sunrise 3 days in a row." You both fall silent. That's a big deal. You return to your home thoughtful. That night you wait. The sky darkens. The jungle exhales. And then a chorus. Rich, vibrating, undeniable. The frogs are back in force. Your wife pokes her head out. "Are you going to just sit there listening all night?" You nod. "They're singing the weather. Or gossiping about you." You listen harder. Rain begins just before dawn. This time the frogs didn't lie. And neither did your brother-in-law's bizarre, slightly soggy chart. The season has begun. The beans will swell. The corn will rise. And the frogs, like all great sages, will go quiet again, having said their piece. The corn is watching you. You wake to the sound of husks rustling in the breeze. Not trees. Not leaves. Husks. Dry, papery. Whispering like someone quietly judging your life choices in the next room. The cornfield is awake now. Stalks grown tall, tasseled, golden with age and audibly smug about it. You rub your eyes, step outside, and stare into a sea of maize. It goes on far longer than it did yesterday. Did someone plant more in the night? Did the corn multiply? Is this what victory looks like? Your wife joins you with 2 steaming bowls of atoll. The thick maize drink you both pretend to enjoy. "The corn grew tall last night," she says. You nod. "I think it's planning something." "Corn always is," she replies, sipping ominously. "It's planting season's peak now, which means your days are shaped entirely by the needs of grain. Your hands are cracked. Your knees pop when you squat. Your sandals smell permanently of compost. You've become one with the dirt, and yet it's oddly satisfying. Every row of corn is a ledger. Every harvest, a reckoning. You walk through the milpa with pride. Even the frogs seem impressed, chirping politely from the edges, as if to say, "Well played, biped." But not everything's perfect. There's the issue of the missing squash. Not stolen, just gone. Vanished. Removed by forces either natural or, as your neighbor suggests, cursed by a jealous yam spirit. You try to investigate like a very lazy detective. You find a trail of disturbed leaves, a suspicious feather, and an angry possum in your gourd pile. You abandon the case. Too many loose ends. Probably politics. Back in the village, the local astronomer is giving a public demonstration with an elaborate stone tool that looks like a sundial, an abacus, and a toothpick holder had a complicated baby. He's using it to track Venus. You ask what Venus is doing today. He peers, squints, does some calculations in his head. Venus is hiding behind the sun, he says solemnly. On purpose. You ask. We think so. He goes on to explain that Venus's position, when it disappears from view, is often linked to omens, war, or unusually spicy chilies. Maya astronomers took these cycles seriously, especially the 584-day Venus cycle, which they recorded with extraordinary accuracy. They built observatories, aligned temples with the heavens, and knew more about the sky than most modern amateur stargazers with phone apps and energy drinks. You are, frankly, in awe. You walk home under a twilight sky. Your son points to a cluster of stars. That one's the corn ear. That one's the jaguar's belly. That one's Uncle Tool. You look. Why does it look like a gourd? Uncle Tool has a big nose. Fair point. Later, a storyteller visits your plaza. She's old, slightly cross-eyed, with a laugh like a frog with a cold. She tells the tale of a rain god who fell in love with a frog and gave her the power to call storms with her voice. Everyone listens, sipping warm drinks. Even the dogs hush. She ends with, "So be kind to frogs. You never know who they're dating." And then she asks for donations in the form of tamales. You give her 2 and a squash. That night, as you lie in your hammock, belly full, head spinning with stars and legends, you wonder, did the frog god story come from weather observation, or the other way around? Historians still debate whether ancient Maya mythology emerged as a poetic response to climate patterns, or if the belief system shaped how people saw the natural world. Probably both. Probably something weirder. You fall asleep to the sound of frogs and corn husks murmuring secrets. You're not sure you want to know what the corn is saying, but it's definitely watching you. The sacred job of listening to things that don't talk. The next morning, you wake up with a question that won't go away. Who was the first person to say, "Hey, let's listen to frogs and base the planting schedule on their croaks"? Like, how did that pitch go? You imagine it, an ancient meeting of the village council. A nervous young farmer raises his hand and says, "I know this sounds weird, but the frogs were really loud last night. Maybe it means something?" Everyone stares. Then an elder nods slowly. "Fascinating. Get that man a title and a basket of sweet potatoes." In truth, the Maya had a rich tradition of natural observation. Farmers weren't just planters, they were quiet scientists, spiritual interpreters, and weather detectives. The jungle was a noisy place, and your job was to figure out which noises meant anything. Frogs were particularly helpful, not because they cared, but because they couldn't help themselves. Their mating calls were tied directly to moisture, humidity, and impending rain. Some species croaked before it rained. Some waited until it was pouring. Some just enjoyed the attention. Today you're shadowing one of the frog listeners, a man named Balaam, whose ears are slightly too big and whose patience is unmatched. He sits beside a marsh from sunup to dusk, recording frog sounds in a codex using tiny glyphs. There are symbols for chirp, croak, singing argument, confused silence, and possible toad. You ask if it's boring. He shrugs. Only if you don't like frogs. Fair enough. Around midday, a young girl arrives with a basket of tortillas and questions about frog marriages. Balaam answers solemnly, "They prefer pond weddings. You learn a lot just from watching. Frogs sing louder when the air gets sticky. They go silent before the heaviest storms. They don't like windy nights. They avoid days when Venus is in retrograde or something like that." You nod like you understand. This kind of observation isn't always recorded in royal codices or temple murals. It's found in daily practice, oral memory, and jokes told over fermented corn beer. But it mattered, and still does. Later, you walk back through the plaza. A small market is forming chilies, beans, woven baskets, painted gourds. You overhear a dispute between two women over whether a frog-shaped hairpin is sacred or just stylish. You offer your opinion. "Both," you say. They nod solemnly. That evening, the village gathers for another sky reading. The priest has climbed a platform, robe flapping like a disappointed curtain, arms raised. "Today," he says, "the moon will flirt with the crocodile star cluster." There's murmuring, which means, he continues, there may be dreams of rain, and frogs will be unusually poetic. He gestures dramatically. A frog nearby lets out a very ordinary croak. "Poetic," he insists. Someone claps. You sit beside your son, who asks if frogs can be stars too. "Maybe they already are," you say. That night you dream of a sky filled with amphibians. Frogs jumping from constellation to constellation, playing leapfrog across the Milky Way. Each time they land, it rains a little. The wind carries the faintest sound of croaking from far-off ponds, and even the stars seem to shimmer to their rhythm. In this world, frogs are the timekeepers, and the time, always nearly raining. When the rain talks back, you wake up in the middle of the night because something is dripping on your nose. At first, you blame a leaky thatch roof. Then you realize you're not indoors. You fell asleep under the stars again, beside the frog marsh, with a turtle as your pillow. The turtle looks annoyed. The rain has arrived, not in a dramatic, thunderous flood, but in a polite, drizzly whisper. It's the kind of rain that says, "Excuse me if you don't mind. I'll be wetting everything you own now." Balaam, your frog-listening friend, is already awake. He sits perfectly still, as if listening to a sermon only amphibians can hear. "This is the right kind," he whispers. "The frogs were correct. You want to be impressed, but also you're very damp." A drip makes its way down your back in a slow, passive-aggressive crawl. You wonder if this is how the Maya gods show affection. Mild discomfort, followed by useful revelations. The villagers begin to stir. Rain like this doesn't happen randomly. It's a signal, not just for crops, but for rituals, offerings, and dance. Yes, dance. The sky does not simply cry for no reason. It expects rhythm in return. You shuffle back to your home, where your wife is already preparing the offerings. Corn, beans, cacao paste, and a small carved frog figurine with suspiciously googly eyes. Did you borrow this from the children's shrine? You ask. She nods. It croaks if you tilt it. You tilt it. Croaks. You nod, respectfully. By midday, the village plaza transforms into a makeshift ceremonial space. Banana leaves are laid out like rugs. Flowers are scattered with great inefficiency. Children wear masks shaped like storm clouds. One has accidentally glued a lightning bolt to their forehead. It's both adorable and alarming. The elders assemble. The main priest, today wearing a feather cloak that looks like it molted mid-speech, begins the rain call ceremony. Everyone raises their hands. The sky watches, unimpressed. Then someone starts the frog dance. It's not a subtle performance. There is hopping. There is flailing. There is a rhythm, but it's more interpretive than intentional. You join in tentatively, then with more enthusiasm than grace. Even the shy boy who only speaks to his clay turtle joins, hopping in tight, calculated angles. And the rain keeps falling, heavier now as if finally convinced you mean it. The mud becomes part of the ritual. Toes squish, ankles disappear. There's laughter, then a small accident involving a slippery gourd and someone's dignity. The priest closes the ceremony with a blessing to Chuck, the Maya god of rain, often imagined as a reptilian figure with a conch shell nose and the eyebrows of someone who just discovered wet socks. Chuck is said to carry an axe that creates thunder when he strikes the clouds. He's not particularly subtle, but apparently he likes frogs, and dancing, and dramatic poses on mountain tops. No one's seen Chuck directly, of course. Historians still debate whether depictions of Chuck are literal interpretations, metaphoric, or artistic exaggerations made to impress rival villages. You like to think he's real, and just waiting for someone to invent waterproof shoes. As evening falls, the rain stops with comedic timing. Just as you sit down and relax, the clouds pull away like theater curtains. The sky clears. The frogs begin again, not urgently but contentedly. You hear the words of the elder priest. The rain listens, but it also speaks. You just need muddy feet and an open ear. You stretch out beside the fire. The turtle returns, less annoyed now. A child plays a hollow gourd flute, badly. The fire crackles, and steam lifts from the plaza's drying stones like a collective sigh. You've danced for the sky, and maybe, just maybe, it noticed. Calendars made of stars and mud. The next morning arrives like a well-timed drumbeat. Not too fast, not too slow. The perfect tempo for someone who stayed up too late dancing with frogs. The plaza is scattered with the aftermath of joy. Damp feathers, soggy corn husks, a child still wearing a cloud mask and asleep in a basket. You nod at the sunrise and step gingerly through the leftovers. Today is calendar day. Not check your phone kind of calendar. This is the Maya calendar. More complicated, more beautiful, and definitely more intimidating. The kind of calendar that looks like it might cast a spell if you pronounce it wrong. You follow the procession to the house of the timekeeper, a quiet man named TZI. He's so old that no one remembers when he wasn't the timekeeper. He wears a robe dyed with faded stars and a necklace made of tiny clay gears. His house is full of symbols. Spirals, dots, bars, turtle shells, and diagrams that look like crossword puzzles drawn by celestial librarians. The central piece is a great circular stone, the Tsokin, the 260-day sacred calendar. He begins to speak, but not in full sentences. Instead, he hums dates. He chants them in rhythmic syllables, each tone marking a specific point in time. It sounds like a lullaby built from numbers. Today is 12 Ken, part of a cycle involving the earth, harvests, and, conveniently, frogs. You're starting to suspect frogs are always relevant if you try hard enough. Then comes the Hob calendar, the 365-day solar cycle. It's used for agriculture, politics, and birthday parties. Together, the two calendars form a system of interlocking gears, like time made visible, measurable, and spiritual. TZI explains that when certain dates align, particularly with celestial events like eclipses, Venus risings, or frog booms, decisions are made. Ceremonies are planned. Fields are planted. People get married or don't. The Maya weren't just staring at the sky. They were mapping meaning into it. You ask if the calendar ever gets it wrong. TZI raises an eyebrow. The calendar never lies, but people do. That checks out. As you sit and listen, a child points to the ceiling. There, hanging like a dusty dream, is a mobile of the Pleiades, a star cluster known to the Maya as Zab. It appears just before the rainy season. Farmers would wait for it, watching the horizon like stagehands before a show. TZI tells a story. Once, the stars were frogs. They jumped into the sky to escape a long drought. Now they remind us when to plant, if we remember to look. Later, you try to explain the system to your friend, who is mostly interested in gourd juggling. You draw diagrams in the dirt. They nod politely, then ask if the calendar can predict who will win the annual pepper eating contest. You say, only if it's spicy enough. The day ends with a visit to the old observatory on the hill. Built with stone and shadows, its corridors align with solstices and equinoxes. You stand in a chamber where the sun touches the back wall for only a few minutes, twice a year. It's like being inside a clock made of fire. You feel small, not in a bad way, in the way that makes you whisper without meaning to. A lizard watches you from the stone sill. You whisper, "Do you know what day it is?" It blinks slowly. That night, the stars arrive like patient teachers. They twinkle, shimmer, and glide. And as you lie in your hammock, staring upward, you realize time isn't something you follow. It's something you listen to, like frogs, or rain, or old men with clay calendars and opinions. You drift to sleep thinking of gears turning in the sky, of stars leaping like amphibians through forever, and of calendars made not to control the future, but to make peace with it. The clay whisperers, You wake to the sound of gentle thumping. Not alarming thumping, just the kind that makes you feel like the ground is politely trying to get your attention. It's the Potters. Down by the riverbank, they've already been at it for hours, shaping the day from wet earth and calm hands. You stretch, yawn, and wander down to join them. The air is humid, but peaceful, like the jungle is holding its breath, waiting for something subtle and profound, like a frog cough or the sigh of a clay jar. One of the elder Potters, a woman named Shuanon, greets you with a nod. Her hands are permanently dusted in ochre. She doesn't waste words. Instead, she offers you a seat and a lump of earth the size of your skull. The Maya Potters are more than artisans. They are chroniclers. Their pots don't just hold water or beans. They hold stories, star charts, calendar days, God's mid-transformation, and the occasional inside joke. You begin to shape the clay. The squelches. That's a good sign. Shuanon instructs you to let the frog guide your hands. You're not sure if that's spiritual advice or pottery slang, but you nod solemnly as if you understand. She shows you how to pinch the base, to coil the neck, to scratch designs using a sharpened piece of jaguar bone. Soon, the whole group is humming, a rhythmic, melodic thrum of shaping, smoothing, breathing. It's the sound of generations folding into dirt. One pot nearby has a comically large frog painted on its side. Not regal, not mystical, just very round. It's sitting atop what looks like a calendar wheel, its tongue extended in mid-catch toward a star-shaped insect. You raise an eyebrow. Shuanon smiles faintly. Some frogs eat time, she says. Right? Obviously. As the day wears on, the clay dries. Some of it cracks slightly in the sun, earning soft curses from the apprentices. Shuanon tells them, cracks are messages, not mistakes. Later, they will fire the pots in an open pit, surrounding them with burning wood and dung. The air will smell like history and practicality. You'll watch as your lopsided jug turns a warm, mottled brown. It's not beautiful, but it looks like it has a story. You ask Shuanon what people usually paint on these. She shrugs. Rain, stars, frogs, their mother-in-law, and sometimes love letters. Really, hidden in the pictographs of Maya pottery are delicate lines, odes to absent lovers, sarcastic poems about rival farmers, and notes like, this bowl belongs to Chicxul. Steal it and face fire. One jar famously bears the inscription, I watched the stars alone, and they watched back. Tell no one. You think about writing something poetic on yours, but instead you draw a large frog wearing a crown. Then you add a few stars and a suspicious-looking carrot. Nobody questions it. You're fitting in just fine. That evening, the Potters sit around the fire, telling stories passed down through too many mouths to trace. One tale is about a clay bowl that grew legs and ran away during a drought. Another is about a pottery shard that whispered secrets in the night. It's unclear whether these are metaphors or just weird Tuesday nights. A child asks, what happens to pots that break? Shuanon replies, they become memory. You plant them in the field. Then the corn remembers you. You don't know if that's symbolic, agricultural, or both, but it feels right. As the stars rise, you touch your frog jug, still warm, a little wobbly, and probably cursed, and smile. You've made something that might survive centuries, or at least until someone drops it while dancing. What the jungle knows. The jungle doesn't speak in full sentences. It murmurs, clicks, sighs in green. You walk a narrow path at dawn, guided by a hunter named Pakel. His name means shield, though he moves like wind, fast, quiet, and slightly disappointed in your noisy sandals. Today's mission: to observe the seasonal behaviors of the jungle animals. Not to hunt them. Not today. This is the time for noticing. The Maya, after all, don't draw hard lines between astronomy and zoology. A comet might be a celestial jaguar. A frog's burp might echo a thunder god. A monkey's tantrum could indicate a solar flare. Pakel stops and gestures silently. Ahead, you spot a bright green bird, the quetzal, perched on a twisted branch like royalty with feathers. It puffs up, shrieks a single note, then flies off in a flutter of tail feathers. That means rain is 3 days off, Pakel says. You wait for a longer explanation. There isn't one. Next, you come across a troop of spider monkeys, swinging lazily above. One throws a fruit at Pakel, who dodges with annoying grace. Disrespectful, he mutters. It's a Monkey Tuesday. You do not ask what that means. By midday, you're sweating through every fiber of your tunic. Pakel, somehow, looks fresh and mildly amused. He tells you about the Tiziaikin, birds that call out before earthquakes, and about ants who rebuild their mounds in specific directions, predicting floods. And then there are the frogs. Always the frogs. They stop croaking the night before a storm, Pakel says, or when the gods are watching. You nod. At this point, if the frogs started reciting poetry, you wouldn't blink. You reach a clearing. In the center, a stone altar overgrown with vines. It's older than the village, older than names. Carvings of frogs, moons, and what looks like a very surprised monkey. This was the listening place, Pakel whispers. Here the ancients would sit in silence and record sounds, bird calls, insect rhythms, howler-monkey arguments. They mapped these into patterns and noticed the way they echoed sky cycles. The jungle was their calendar, their myth, their university. You try sitting quietly. A toucan squawks at you, loudly. You close your eyes and breathe with the forest. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, a frog croaks once. A second later, a distant roll of thunder answers. You're not sure if it's coincidence or conversation. As you leave the clearing, Pakel shows you a tree with bark that peels in perfect circles. He says it's sacred to scribes. They used its pulp to make Amati paper for codices, calendars, and bureaucratic frog memos. One such codex, centuries later, would be discovered halfway across the world in a European collector's vault. It describes a year when frogs predicted an eclipse, then danced themselves into a trance under the blood moon. Historians still debate whether that account was literal, ceremonial, or simply what happens when too much fermented cacao is consumed. Back in the village, you help unload the day's harvest, plantains, sweet potatoes, and a few curious mushrooms that seem to hum slightly. Night falls like a slow curtain. The jungle hums its lullaby of insect clicks and tree sighs. You lie in your hammock, arms behind your head, and think, the sky has stars, the earth has frogs, and the jungle? The jungle knows everything. You just have to stop talking long enough to hear it. The mathematicians who counted rain. This morning you wake up to numbers. Not spreadsheets or equations, don't worry, nothing stressful. These are soft numbers, earthy numbers, rain-born numbers whispered between beans and maize, carved into walls and counted on knuckles and turtle shells. You rise slowly from your hammock. Outside, the air smells like roasted corn and wet leaves. A scribe waves you over with ink-stained fingers. Today, you're visiting the calendar keepers. They don't live in palaces or wear golden robes. They live beside the schoolhouse, near the chalky cliff, under roofs thick with moss. Their tunics are simple. Their hands are always busy. One of them, an old man named Balaam, leads you inside a dark, quiet room where the only light comes from a single hole in the ceiling. It lands on a large stone circle covered in strange glyphs and tiny animal symbols. This, he says, is the Habda. You nod politely. The word sounds like something that might be a soup. He chuckles. That's just one of our calendars. We have several. Life is too complicated for one. They track days by the sun, Hab, by sacred rituals, soak in, and in long, sweeping mathematical sentences called the long count, which has a name that sounds epic because it is. It measures time like a river, not just its surface but its sediment and currents. Today's date, they inform you, is 9.12.3.4.6 or something similar. You nod again. You've absolutely no idea what that means, but you admire the confidence. Balaam hands you a long bone etched with dots and bars. You learn quickly. 1 dot equals 1. A bar equals 5. Anything more than that, you stack or roll into higher tiers. It's charming, like Lego, but divine. Soon, you're drawing frogs and clouds next to numbers, building a weather calendar. The Maya counted not just years and moons, but frog appearances, croak intervals, dew patterns, and dream-heavy nights. One codex, now lost, supposedly tracked 34 years of toad belly patterns. Another, preserved in a clay jar, contains a joke about the stars always being late to their own festivals. Historians still debate whether this was astronomy or humor. Balaam notes with a wink. The scribes take turns explaining the Maya vigesimal system base 20. It's based on fingers and toes, which makes you wonder whether sandals were the ancient abacus. Later, you sit on a stone bench watching a young girl count hummingbirds as they zip past blossoms. She whispers, 7 today, and marks it with charcoal on a flat leaf. You don't ask why. You suspect that everything means something. You're starting to understand. Maya time is not linear, it folds like cloth. You live the same day every year in slightly different flavors. A frog croaks today, and that means in 260 days it might rain. or you might fall in love. Or both. Before bed, the scribes gather around a painted wall calendar and update it with today's events. Mild breeze, 3 frogs, no eclipses, 1 visitor with sleepy eyes. That's you. You feel strangely honored. You close your eyes with the gentle thought. You've become a number, and that number is soft and small and safe. The star watchers with smoke in their eyes. Tonight you walk uphill under a moon that feels a little too large. The stars are out, but they're not just decoration. Here they are neighbors, dramatic neighbors, always performing something and always being watched. You're headed to the observatory, a place where the Maya sky watchers gather, not to look through telescopes, those haven't been invented yet, but to align stone with starlight and memory. A woman named Ixchel meets you at the top. She's wrapped in layers of soft, embroidered fabric, the kind that tells time just by how it drapes. Her braid is coiled like a galaxy. She smells like pine smoke and flowers that bloom only once every few moons. She nods toward the sky. You've arrived on a good night. The vegetable constellation is visible. You blink. Sorry, the what now? She points to a faint curve of stars. We call that the chili gourd. And that one over there, the long root, it's based on a yam. See how it bends slightly? You squint. She's right. It looks like a carrot trying to do yoga. Another astronomer steps in. That one's called the frog who waits. It only shows during the dry season. You're not sure if they're naming actual stars or reciting bedtime stories. But either way, it's soothing. The Maya didn't just track stars for navigation or festivals. They read their patterns like a farmer reads cloud shapes or a child reads their teacher's face. Stars told them when to plant, when to fish, when to make sacrifices of time, not necessarily goats, and when to prepare for rain. Tonight, the watchers have built a small fire. They burn copal, a resin that smells like the forest exhaling. The smoke rises and curls, and Ixchel watches how it moves. If the smoke trails toward the yam star, we'll get storms, she says, utterly serious. Someone else adds, unless the frogs say otherwise. You're not sure if this is science or sibling rivalry, but the tension is real. One astronomer mutters something and rushes inside the dome-like building. You follow. Inside it's cool and dark. Slits in the walls frame the stars with eerie precision. These are zenith tubes, stone windows aligned with the path of the sun and certain bright stars. At solstice, the light shoots straight down the tube and lands in a carved frog mouth. It's a functional, Ixchel says. One wall is painted with an elaborate mural of Venus. The Maya tracked Venus obsessively. Its phases, its rise and set, its strange relationship to drought and war. They believed Venus could bring floods or betrayal, she explains. So naturally, we built a calendar around it. In one dusty corner, you spot a frog painted on a star. Not near a star. On it, as if the star were its lily pad. You point it out. Ixchel just shrugs. Some frogs dream big. Midnight nears, and the astronomers grow quiet. They lie on the stone floor, looking upward, counting the seconds between a frog croak and a shooting star. You lie beside them. The sky feels closer here, less vast, more personal. Somewhere, a scribe is probably marking this moment in dots and bars. Night calm, stars visible, visitor snoring gently. You fall asleep before you can protest. The temple that whispers the weather. You wake before dawn, bundled in a soft shawl of cotton and sleep, your face marked faintly by the stone floor. Around you, the astronomers are still. One is snoring. Another mumbles about frogs and root vegetables. Ixchel offers you a small clay cup of warm, spiced chocolate and motions silently toward the east. It's time to visit the temple. Not just any temple, mind you. This one is built on a limestone hill with a view so wide. Even the sky seems to pause here before moving on. The Temple of the Rain Whisperer, it's called, not officially, but that's what the villagers say. As you walk the path up, the air grows denser, fragrant with moss and limestone, and filled with the early songs of birds who sound like they've had too much caffeine. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks once and then gives up. You relate deeply. A priestess in indigo robes greets you at the entrance. Her name is Yatzel, and she has the kind of calm that makes you feel immediately out of breath and slightly wrinkled by comparison. Step quietly, she says, not because it's sacred, but because the floor tends to echo like a shout in a cave. You enter. Inside, the temple is humbling. Its ceiling is high and arched like a yawning mouth, its walls covered with old murals, mostly frogs, clouds, and spirals that probably meant something very serious when painted. A row of small windows lines the upper wall, and as the sun rises, thin beams of light slice through like golden thread on a loom. The light tells us the season, Yatzel explains, but it also tells us if the frogs were right. At the center of the temple sits a large circular stone basin filled with water. Around its rim are carved the faces of frogs, each in a slightly different expression. Sleepy, smug, worried, meditative. You find yourself drawn to the smug one. Yatzel takes a pinch of ground bark from a pouch and scatters it over the water's surface. The bark spreads in delicate spirals. Then, almost imperceptibly, the water begins to ripple. You squint. Is there something under the surface? No, it's the air. The water reacts to humidity, to temperature, to breath. The Maya built it as a primitive weather sensor. Or maybe a wishing pool. Or both. Historians still debate the intent. You crouch beside the basin. In the shimmering surface, you see the reflection of the windows, the frogs, and your own slightly disoriented face. A small toad outside croaks 4 times, then pauses. Yatzel counts silently, then smiles. Early rain tomorrow. Probably. You move to a side chamber smaller and warmer. Here, the walls are coated in thin clay, and villagers come in the early mornings to whisper their dreams into the wall. The clay hardens. The words vanish, but they believe the temple remembers. You press your hand to the wall. It's smooth, warm, slightly damp, like it just woke up too. By mid-morning, more people arrive. Farmers, scribes, old women with baskets of offerings. One man carries a frog in a small woven box. Another lays out a bundle of herbs next to a carved stone shaped like a cloud. They're not praying. Not in the dramatic way you might expect. They're simply updating the forecast. One scribe laughs and adds a row of dots to a wall chart. 3 frogs, 2 croaks, 1 skeptical priestess. Yatzil rolls her eyes with elegance. Before leaving, you step onto the open terrace behind the temple. The sky is pale blue, dotted with lazy clouds. Below you, the village stirs, smoke rising from cook fires, people walking slowly toward their crops. You've never seen weather worship treated so tenderly. Not as fear, not as obedience, but as a quiet relationship. A dialogue. You speak to the rain, and if you're lucky, it answers. Or it croaks. You walk back down the hill, passing the smug frog carving one last time. You swear it winks. The crops who keep secrets. Today begins with a riddle. What plant tastes like rain but grows from fire? You're too sleepy for this. But the farmer who asks it doesn't wait for an answer. He just chuckles and hands you a spade. You're in the Chinampas now, floating fields, kind of raised beds of rich soil, surrounded by water channels. Like someone took a rice paddy and gave it stage presence. The soil here is black and soft, like overbaked cake. Every footstep feels like it belongs to someone more grounded than you. A young boy waves you over to his plot. He's planting amaranth, which was both food and festival decor in the ancient Maya world. Tiny red seeds that shimmer like dried blood, but in a good way. You talk to them first, he says solemnly, or they won't grow. You clear your throat and address the seeds awkwardly. Hello, I'm new here. Please don't die. The boy nods approvingly. As you plant alongside others, you begin to notice the patterns. Crops here are arranged not just for sun and soil, but for companionship. Corn grows with beans, beans hug corn. Squash spreads out below to shade the roots. It's agriculture with personality. A woman named Nima explains, "We plant like we host dinner. You don't sit enemies next to each other." She points to a corner where a lonely pepper plant grows. He's dramatic. We give him space. The fields are filled with quiet music. The rustle of leaves, frogs calling from irrigation ditches, the soft splash of someone rinsing maize in the canal. You help harvest sweet potatoes, which have names here. This one is Little Moon, that one is Frog's Tongue, and that stubby one is called Looks Like Uncle. Later, you rest under a canopy of vines and drink a bitter tea made from leaves that once predicted the rainy season by curling inward 3 days before the first drop. Do they still work? You ask. Nima shrugs. Sometimes. Depends on their mood. You scribble this down. Science. Mood-based botany. One farmer brings out an old clay jug and pours a liquid onto the roots of several plants. It smells of ashes and honey. He calls it storm water, collected only during specific moon phases. You notice the frogs again. Always frogs. They sit on the warm stones between the fields, looking entirely uninterested but somehow omniscient. They know things, Nima says, more than we do. You can't argue. In the afternoon heat, The farmers gather under a thatched shelter and take turns telling stories. Not myths. Real, sleepy little stories. The corn that grew upside down, the frog that jumped into the priest's sandal, the star that blinked during a wedding. One story involves a cucumber that predicted an eclipse. You ask if that's a joke. You are met with absolute seriousness. As the day ends, the fields grow quiet again. The frogs have gone still. A soft wind curls over the water, and you sit with your feet in a cool canal, feeling the day unspool gently. Above you, a line of birds crosses the sky like writing you don't yet know how to read. One frog croaks, then another, then silence. You think just for a moment that you might understand what they're trying to say. But then your eyes close. The sky you've been waiting for. You wake before dawn, not because someone rouses you, but because the air has changed. It's still dark, but not the kind of dark that holds sleep. This one hums softly, like the world is inhaling. You follow the scent of burning copal toward a small clearing just beyond the chinampas. Someone's lit a circle of candles around a low stone platform, and an old man is already seated there, staring at the stars like they owe him money. His name is Tsekel, and his job is simple: to listen to the sky. You sit beside him in silence. He nods, but does not speak. Above you, the stars are impossibly clear. It's not the fanciful sky of paintings, where every star is spaced out like a jewelry ad. The sky is messy, crowded, ancient, heavy with unnamed things. And tonight the constellations are off, at least to your modern eyes, because in Maya astronomy, the sky isn't divided the same way. It's not Orion or Cassiopeia. It's a crocodile, a smoking mirror, a death bat holding a flower, and tonight they are all in alignment. This is when the frogs begin to listen, Tsekel says finally. Not speak. Listen. You don't ask what that means. You're starting to understand that Maya knowledge often arrives without explanation. Tsekel lifts a small bowl and taps it gently. It rings soft, hollow, like a frog's belly. A moment later, a croak answers from the reeds. See? He smiles. They're tuning in. Another priest arrives, this one younger, with ink-stained fingers and a bundle of scrolls. He lays them out on the stone. Star maps. But instead of neat grids and coordinates, they're painted with fruit, vegetables, animal bones, and occasional question marks. You point to one with a large painted gourd floating next to a crescent moon. Ah, says the young priest. That was a guess, but a beautiful one. Tsekel chuckles. He thinks cucumbers control the tides. Only certain kinds. The priest mutters. The ceremony begins without ceremony. No fanfare. No speech, just a slow, careful pointing, one star, then another. As each is named, a toad is gently lifted from a clay jar and placed beside a bowl of water. This isn't magic. It's meteorology. The frogs react to humidity, to temperature, to the season's rhythm. But the Maya noticed patterns. Patterns between frog croaks and falling stars, between moisture in the soil and celestial events. It's not science the way you learned it, but it is science. You've heard of the Dresden Codex? The priest asks. You nod vaguely. Ancient Maya manuscript, full of astronomy, difficult to decipher. Well, he continues, we're still arguing over whether one of the tables is a frog breeding calendar. You both sit there, staring at a diagram of a toad hopping toward Venus. You believe it completely. As dawn begins to pale the sky, the frogs croak one final time. 3 long notes and then a pause. Sekal nods slowly. That means 2 days of wind, then rain. The scrolls are rolled. The toads are returned. The fire goes out, and the sky softens. You walk back through the chinampas one last time, frogs leaping beside you like escorts. Villagers are already beginning to stir, carrying bundles of herbs, whispering to their crops. You pass the smug frog carving once more. Still smug. In the village square, someone's hanging a new scroll on the message board. A crude painting of a frog under a cloud, followed by a symbol that looks suspiciously like a sandal. You smile. You've seen the sky. You've heard the frogs. You've walked through a world where astronomy, agriculture, weather, and humor all share a single language. And maybe, just maybe, you understand it a little now. Maybe. Or maybe you're just tired. Final wind down. Let it all settle. So now let it go. Let the frogs croak softly in your mind, like distant drums wrapped in fog. Let the stars blur, not with disinterest, but with warmth, like candlelight behind eyelids. You've walked through temples that whisper, fields that listen, skies that speak in vegetable metaphors. You've followed constellations drawn not in lines, but in laughter and rainwater. The ground beneath you is soft. The sky above you is quiet. Somewhere, a cucumber is predicting the next eclipse. You believe in it. Your hands smell faintly of soil and cacao. Your ears still carry the echo of Tsekel's bowl, that quiet, hollow chime. The frogs are somewhere nearby, not needing to be seen, only trusted. The stories you heard today, the talking roots, the calendar of croaks, the smug amphibian in carved stone, have settled around you like blankets made of moss and memory. There is no test tomorrow, no quiz, no need to remember which frog croaked when, or which moon sat beside which vegetable. It all happened, and that's enough. Let your breath slow. Let your thoughts drift, like mist curling over a wet stone, like water running through the reeds, like a fire going out without fuss. You've traveled through a world of rhythms, earth rhythms, sky rhythms, stories told in rainfall and recorded in frog songs. And now that rhythm is simply sleep, deep old quiet sleep. Good night, traveler. Sleep well beneath the frog-filled stars.